Hey there everyone, it's Moose and thank you so much for joining me back here. Today we're going to do my October wrap-up video. I used to do them, I quit for a while because I didn't really feel like I was reading enough or had enough to say, but I find that they're a good way to help me keep track of my reading. So we're going to do my October one today. I'm here by the fire because it is freezing in West Virginia. I don't think it's supposed to get above like 40 degrees in West Virginia today. So it's very cold. In the month of October, I read a total of 4 books, 2 physical, 1 ebook, and then 1 audiobook. So a big variety for me. A lot of my reads here recently have been audiobooks, so I'm actually pretty happy that I got some physical reading done in the month of October. So let's just go ahead and start. I do mine chronologically. So the first book that I finished in October was Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Eames. This is an adult fantasy novel that follows a band of mercenaries, I guess they would be considered, who have kind of grown older. The band disbanded years and years and years ago, but something happens and one of the main characters of the band wants to get it back together to go achieve this goal that he has. I don't want to spoil it too much, but that's essentially the premise of the book. I did really enjoy this. I don't remember what I rated it. Hold on, let me check Goodreads. I've started rating my books too. They're apt to change. I feel like my opinions change on books the more I have time to think about them. Oh, I didn't even rate this one. What would I rate this one? I would probably give this one about a 3.5, simply because there are a lot of D&D references in this and a lot of, I think it's 70s or 80s, I think it's 70s, like rock band references, and I don't get those, either one. I don't play D&D. I was born in the 90s, so I mean, yeah, I just don't get those kind of references, so I didn't have as much of a connection with this book. I will say the characters were very enjoyable. This is a light-hearted adult fantasy if that's what you're looking for. There are some heavier topics, I would say, that are discussed, but overall it's pretty light-hearted. The characters are enjoyable. I found myself really liking a handful of them, 2 or 3 of them would be considered my favorites, I guess. Moog is my favorite. If you've read this book and you're just curious, that and Clay, I did enjoy Clay Cooper, who is the main character in this book. Along with that, Clay, it's not first person narrated, but it is from Clay's perspective, kind of like Harry Potter. Harry Potter is just always the example I use whenever I talk about a third person narrative that follows one character. Anyways, so this is set up like that, and since it kind of is from Clay's perspective, you get a lot of his side thoughts and comments about what's happening in the book. And he's a very sarcastic and witty character, which I really enjoyed. So if you're looking for a lighthearted fantasy, you play D&D, you like rock music, this might be the book for you. I would recommend it even if you don't play D&D or listen to rock music, but you might not get as much out of the experience. Next up, I read Muse of Nightmares by Lonnie Taylor. This was my ebook read for the month. So this is the second installment of the Strange the Dreamer duology. I really don't know if it has a specific name. So I listened to Strange the Dreamer. I read this one on ebook, and I will say that I enjoyed it. Let me see if I gave it a rating. I gave this one 3 stars as well. I think I enjoyed Strange the Dreamer a little bit more, but I did enjoy all of the background knowledge that we get in this book. It kind of explains why the Mizarthim did what they did, why they were in Weep, that sort of thing. You get more of a background on Laszlo and his life. Overall, I thought it was a pretty appropriate wrap-up to the duology. However, at the very end of it, it says the end, and then in quotation marks it says, or is it? So I think she did that to kind of leave it open if she wanted to write another book. However, if she did continue on with the series, I don't know that I would read the next installment. I do think that this duology is a complete story within itself. So if another book was to come out, I don't know that I would necessarily go to pick it up. If you have read Strange the Dreamer, I would recommend reading this one just because it does wrap up the story quite nicely. There is a lot more action in this one. A lot more happens. You get a little bit more of an explanation as to how their different gifts, powers, whatever you want to call them, why they have them, that sort of thing. So I do think it is a good addition to the story. That being said, I wasn't blown away by it. It was just good to have to wrap up the story. After this one, Along with this one, I don't know, it took me kind of a while to get through this one. I listened to The Silver Chair, which is book 6 in the Chronicles of Narnia. It depends on what order you go by. There are so many different ones that you can read. This, for me, I think was the 6th one. I enjoyed this one. I gave it a 3 as well. I feel like a lot of my books this month were just 3s. I wasn't completely blown away by any of them, but I didn't dislike them. 3s are a pretty average rating for me. They're just that. I wasn't blown away, but I enjoyed it. You know, it's not enough to just give it a 2 or anything like that. So that was the case for this one. In The Silver Chair, I can never say that correctly. In The Silver Chair, we follow Eustace, which is the cousin of, you know, the 4 Pearsons, I don't remember their last name. Susan, Edmund, Lucy, and Peter. He's their cousin. I quite like Eustace. I liked him in Voyage of the Dawn Treader. Voyage of the Dawn Treader is one of my favorite ones in the Chronicles so far. So I did enjoy getting more of his story. I'm glad he got to come back to Narnia. However, I think it was my fault that I didn't enjoy this book a little bit more. I started reading this on audiobook. I started listening to it rather. And I kind of stopped listening to it for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It was a long time. So when I finally started listening to it again to finish it, I was kind of already taken out of the story a little bit, which I do think had an effect on my enjoyment for the read. That and the story just wasn't as interesting for me, if I'm being honest. It wasn't bad. I just enjoyed some of the other ones in this series a little bit more, if that makes sense. My last read for the month was Terrier, which is book 1 in the Becca Cooper series by Tamora Pierce. I read this book back in middle school, right? And I really enjoyed it, and so I bought them as an adult, and they have been sitting on my shelf for years. So I finally thought it was time to go ahead and reread this series, and I'm glad that I did. I gave this a 3.5, a 3.5. Simply because, again, I didn't hate it, but I did really enjoy my time reading this, but not quite enough to give it a 4. So in this series, we follow a girl named Rebecca Cooper. She is part of the guard for Tortal, I think is the world that she's in right now. And the guards, you know, they don't guard the king or anything like that. The guards are basically cops in this world. They're policemen. She is a puppy in training. So the cops, the guards are called dogs when they are, you know, fully trained and just let out on their own. And then when they're still in training, they're called puppies. So she's a puppy, and she is paired with Tunstall and Goodwin, which are 2 of the best dogs considered for the lower city, which is where she's at, where she's assigned to and where she lives, which does make a difference. I'll point that out because a lot of the guards, the dogs, do not live in the district that they watch, but she does, and so she kind of gets more of an insight into what's happening. She's a little bit more invested in the crimes that they are investigating because she lives in that area. It matters to her. It's where she grew up, so she just feels a connection with it. There are a few things I want to say about this book. One, it says it's like a mystery on the back. Don't miss any of the Becca Cooper mysteries is what it says on the back, which is appropriate. I would consider it a mystery / like detective type novel, which I don't really read much of, especially in the YA genre, which I would consider this. I don't know if it's technically considered YA or middle grade, considering there are some violent things in this book. It's not very descriptive, but it does happen. They are investigating crimes that are kind of brutal. Actually, both of the main crimes in this book revolve around murders, which I don't really think is appropriate for middle grade, if you ask me. That and some of the language in this. Not explicit language, but she talks about prostitutes. She doesn't use the word prostitute. They have their own slang within this book, but you know that's what she's talking about. So that kind of stuff makes me think it's YA. Like I say, she has her own words for stuff, and they talk in slang, which I am very glad the back of this book has a glossary if you need it, which was very helpful at times, considering there is their own dialect within this book. However, it's not so complex that it takes you out of the reading. You kind of pick up on what she's trying to say as you read through with context clues, that kind of thing. You get used to the language within this book, but it is something to get used to. At the very beginning, it was a little difficult to read this book quickly because I would kind of get held up with those words. As I got more familiar with them, it was a lot easier. It went a lot faster. Overall, I really enjoyed this. I have, you know, the next two. I'm getting ready to start the next one, which is Bloodhound. So yeah, if you're looking for a YA mystery detective novel, this is a good one. I would recommend. I would consider it a fantasy detective novel mystery, however you want to put it. She is able to talk to like the ghosts and the spirits that have passed away, which is one of the reasons why she's such a good detective. She really uses that ability to help her discover the answers to the mysteries that are in the book. So yeah, those were the 4 books that I read this month. I'm happy with 4. 2 is always my goal for the month. I just think it's a good goal. I have already met my reading goal for the year, so anything more is just extra that I'm happy about. And 4 is good for me. I feel like it was a pretty average reading month. As you saw, most of my books were about a 3, which is not bad. A lot of people consider 3 to be a bad rating. I don't. It's just like my average. It's just my... It wasn't bad, but it's not my new favorite. You know, that kind of thing. So yeah, it was a pretty good reading month. I'm happy with it. I didn't hate any of the books that I read this month, which is always a good thing. I don't hate many books just in general. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, be sure to subscribe down below and leave a comment. Let me know what you read in the month of October. Let me know what you're going to read in the month of November. I don't make TBRs. They're just not realistic for me. I never stick to them. I'm more of a mood reader. But I am curious what your TBR is, so let me know down below. You guys are awesome. I am thankful for you, and we might be back here next time. I don't think so. This is my last week in West Virginia. I have one video pre-recorded, but it's not here. It's in a different room. So anyways, I'll meet you back here on my channel next time. See ya!